Howdy y'all. How are y'all doing today? I am doing really good. It is a cold, rainy day here in southern Arkansas. And I thought I would do a video about cornbread. I have a friend from the UK who wanted a good recipe for cornbread. And I noticed that this month in my Arkansas Living magazine, which is a monthly magazine that's put out by our rural electric co-op. They send this magazine out, and it's got, you know, all kinds of little different articles and stuff. And this month they had a wonderful article about cornbread. So I thought I would read this to y'all and see if you're interested in all the cool things they have to say about cornbread. So this article is called Golden Goodness. It has a nice picture of a cast iron skillet full of cornbread, and it is by Jennifer Christman. Okay, so this is last month's edition, and it says, in November of election year, with so much talk about red and blue, let's turn our attention and our appetites to a more harmonious, healing color, to the amber-edged, glorious gold of hot-from-the-oven cornbread. Simple yet soulful, cornbread is the edible equivalent of a hug. It offers warm and welcoming relief when the weather or the world seems cold. Authentic and unpretentious, it's abundant at family gatherings and an essential ingredient for holidays and memories. So significant is cornbread to Arkansans that we enjoy it with its golden color representing prosperity alongside black-eyed peas on New Year's Day, and we have a yearly celebration to honor it. The Arkansas Cornbread Festival, held each fall in the South Main section of downtown Little Rock. That is, until COVID-19 caused the cancellation of this month's milestone 10th anniversary festival. Cornbread has been a staple food for generations, and when you think about cornbread, you think about family. And so it's just the idea of bringing people together who are family or friends who consider themselves family. Sharing the southern staple of cornbread just makes you feel good. It brings back memories, and everyone has a different recipe for cornbread, right? You've got sweet and savory, you've got really unique things. At last year's free festival, amateur and professional competitors cooked up everything from basic greens and cornbread to really upscale stuff like crawfish cornbread for 5,000 carbohydrate cravers to sample. While we will have to wait until next year to feast at the festival, we certainly don't have to wait to appreciate cornbread. It is always available through Arkansas recipes and restaurants, and will be making an appearance on many Thanksgiving tables in the form of cornbread dressing this month. Okay, the Cornbread Gospels. James Beard's award-winning cookbook author, Crescent Dragonwagon, who lives in Fayetteville, wrote the book on cornbread, more like the Bible. In 2015, she released the Cornbread Gospels, which includes more than 200 recipes, from 2 grandma's cream cornbread to bourbon banana cornbread pudding with bourbon sauce, as well as history, definitions, stories, and delightfully corny plays on words like once upon a time, like corn pone. Explaining her book's title, Dragonwagon says cornbread is personal, not unlike religion. One big decision in the title of that book was to put an S on the word gospel, because there just isn't one. It's the way you grew up. Whichever one you believe, that's your gospel. Some testify cornbread should be savory. Others believe it should be sweet or spicy. Some prefer it dry. Others drench it with milk or buttermilk. Some insist on cornmeal only, but others sprinkle in flour. Some use skillets. Others select corn stick pans, muffin pans, or casserole dishes. Some use ovens. Others use griddles for variation like hot water cornbread or hoe cakes. Originally from New York, Dragon Wagon was introduced to cornbread by her Virginia native mother. She occasionally made a sweet cornbread, but not very often, she said, and usually it was the kind from a mix. She elaborates in the book. When you open the box, a cellophane bag with the mix itself rested neatly in a flimsy, very shiny aluminum pan, good for one use only. Could you get any more 50s or any further from a cast iron skillet and from scratch than that? Before she moved to the South, Dragon Wagon was introduced to the skillet method by a friend of a neighbor, a Georgia native named Viola. I had never tasted anything. I mean, that cornbread in the skillet with the butter melted in the bottom of the pan. She said, I took one bite of this cornbread and I said, you have got to teach me how to make this. And she did. Excuse me. That buttermilk cornbread, incorporating flour as well as cornmeal and a touch of sugar, would become the signature Dairy Hollow House skillet-sized cornbread that she would serve at a popular inn and restaurant that she owned in Eureka Springs. But not without a bit of controversy. She writes in her cookbook, I hadn't fully realized that while cornbread was traditional, much-loved Ozark family fare, it was also what you ate when the family had no money. Leftover cornbread was what the poor had for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That's what the poor kids brought to school in their lunch pail. It was a line of demarcation. Dragon Wagon recalls that at her restaurant, cornbread was always in our bread basket. A woman who is a native of the Ozarks and who grew up just outside of Eureka Springs took me aside one day and she said, you know, people in town just don't understand why you're serving cornbread at a white tablecloth restaurant. And I said, but you love our cornbread. You eat it every day. And she said, I know, but people are talking about it. And not entirely favorably. But cornbread remained in the bread basket and was the restaurant's single most requested recipe. She concludes today as she did then, if you taste it just for itself without all the connotation, what a delicious food cornbread is. No run-of-the-mill cornbread. James Beard's award-nominated chef Matthew McClure finds cornbread upscale restaurant worthy, and he serves it to his guests at the Hive in Bentonville's 21C Museum Hotel. A fourth-generation Arkansas, originally from Little Rock, he says, I grew up with Jiffy Mix. That's what I make a lot, Jiffy Mix. And that's what my mom used to make. At the Hive, I really want guests, Arkansas or out-of-towners, to have this nostalgic sort of Arkansas culinary experience. I feel like cornbread is a very important part of that. The recipe that he uses and shares freely, which I'm going to put in the description, is one adapted from an old Southern cookbook that he purchased about 15 years ago at an estate sale. My philosophy on cornbread is it's savory. He says, I think that ours is unique because of the fresh ground cornmeal that we get from War Eagle Mills. It's got a little bit of flour in it. It's got a pinch of sugar. I would not say enough to make it sweet, just enough to smooth it out. I'm going to include these recipes in the description under this video. And this is a nice little visual aid here. If you can see, it shows the batter, and then it shows melting butter in your cast iron skillet, and then you pour the batter, and it begins to fry as you pour it in there. And that's how I do my cornbread as well. Okay, and he says we serve it with sorghum butter, and that's where the sweetness comes in. So you've got this sort of hearty, earthy, intensely flavored cornbread made with buttermilk, and when you put the sorghum butter on it, it gives you this complex flavor, and there are all these textures because it's coarse ground. And that's what I feel like belongs on a typical Arkansas table. I don't put jalapenos in it. I don't get fancy with it. Before the batter goes to the restaurant's rectangular cast iron pans that he estimates weighs between 25 and 30 pounds by themselves, melted butter is poured in. He says it sort of fries it a little bit and develops a really great crust. And that's true. That, to me, that's the secret of good cornbread. You pick your recipe. Everybody has a favorite. but you get that hot butter in that cast iron skillet and you pour your batter and let it fry, and that's the secret there, I think. Okay, when the restaurant reopened from the pandemic closure, McClure says that he and his team reevaluated their service and questioned keeping cornbread because we're in such a busy, crazy time. But immediately they decided, we've got to do the cornbread. That's just a big part of who we are. Because we're still in Northwest Arkansas, and because it has been mentioned, our next stop on our state cornbread caravan is Rogers War Eagle Mill, with a history dating back to 1832. Today, War Eagle Mill products, organic cereals, corn products, flours, baking mixes, and a variety of other foods that it sells in store, as well as on its website, wareaglemill.com. Unfortunately, we won't be dining at the Mill's Bean Palace restaurant, as the eatery and tours are currently closed, and likewise the October War Eagle Mill Fall Arts and Crafts Festival was canceled due to the pandemic. But eventually the restaurant will reopen, and when it does, one of the big specialties is bean soup, which is served with the cornbread. It's southern and country and simple, but you can make a great bean soup and a great cornbread, and it really makes people happy. Recipes for Bean Palace bean soup and various cornbread recipes, from BT cornbread, that's bacon and tomato, to orange pecan cornbread, are available on the aforementioned website for home enjoyment, and that is wareaglemill.com. Okay, skillet sensations. In north central Arkansas, a charming spot for a cornbread fix is the Skillet restaurant at the Ozark Folk Center in Mountain View. Although here the cornbread takes the form of corn muffins, baked fresh daily with a smidge of sugar. Half the people want sweet, half the people do not want cornbread sweet. And that's in my experience too. It's half the people want sweet cornbread and half of them do not like it that way at all. Okay, then they start talking about hot water cornbread and skillet cornbread, and the hot water cornbread, I'm just kind of paraphrasing here because I'm running out of time, but the hot water cornbread is when you add boiling water to the cornmeal before you shape it into patties and you fry it in hot oil. And then there's Johnny cakes or hoe cakes, which are kind of like cornbread pancakes. So they talk about how they like those, and it's just goes on a little bit about the Cornbread Festival, which is canceled this year because of COVID, of course, and they have lots of different examples of cornbread. And then, luckily, they list 3 wonderful cornbread recipes, which I am going to write down in the description for everyone to enjoy. So, if you're interested in trying Arkansas cornbread, I'm sure you can find lots more stuff online. These recipes that I'm going to put in the description are the Hives Buttermilk cornbread, and the sorghum butter that goes with it, Dairy Hollow House Skillet Sizzled cornbread, and yellow sweet cornbread. So that's going to be 3 Arkansas cornbread recipes I'm going to present to you in the description if you're interested in trying some good old-fashioned southern cornbread. So thanks for joining me for a little bit on cornbread, and I hope you have a great day. And until next time, y'all be sweet.